Hello, hello, this is Manic Insomniac, and welcome to what I guess is a bit of an audio log regarding Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, this is something I wanted to do on the channel since the very inception of the channel itself. Dungeons and Dragons is quite a recent joy of mine, but it's finally culminated in me running my very own session. Yes, I've DM'd a session in Dungeons and Dragons, and it was a blast, you know. Something just so enjoyable to do, and I just wanted to report my findings a little bit on it. So perhaps a little bit of history first. Dungeons and Dragons, for me as an interest, it came about maybe three and a half years ago, and for the most part, it was just watching videos on YouTube or the occasional live stream here and there. There are some fairly big names around these days, but I really didn't know much about it apart from like peripheral knowledge. Like, I think up until that point, like, I knew the game existed, and I'd seen that Dungeons and Dragons movie, which most people don't tend to think of. But I also had a nice interest in Dragonlance. I read the books, I think Dragons of Autumn Twilight, back when I was maybe 10, 11 years old, and I've got actually a fair few Dragonlance books on my shelf behind me. Um, so I've always had like a passing interest, but to actually start playing it, that didn't happen until maybe about 2 years ago now, I think. I'd heard about Roll20 and joined in for there, and frankly, I got tremendously lucky from what I can tell. The group I rolled into was quite a veteran group, I think. Looking back, like at least one of the players has probably been playing maybe as long as I've been alive, which is saying something. But they're a very understanding group and a very knowledgeable group, and they've taught me a lot. So this first game that I joined, well, 2 years ago now, as I said, we're still going. We're coming up on our like 2 year anniversary, and you'll see me post on Twitter if you follow me over there. Occasionally regarding our sessions, like weird things happening, because it's just a crazy campaign sometimes when you think about it, but it's just so normal for us, and yeah, that has encompassed like almost the entirety of my D&D experience. This is a first edition game, so I don't know how much it compares to other games. Like, I'm aware of 5th edition and 2nd edition games, as well as other systems like Stars of Outnumber, and I've even played a short game in Metamorphosis Alpha. But for the most part, my entire experience has been 1st edition D&D, with, I think, aspects from Unearthed Arcana, and some house rules, and the one module, Castle Amber, which we played a separate game in. But all in all, I've played over about 400 hours of D&D now, at least according to my Roll20 page. So, yeah, this has turned out that I wanted to run my own session. I don't know where this idea formed, but I'm not adverse to creating things. Like, I've always had a passing interest in writing, at the very least, and like the goal somewhere down the line is to write a novel. It never seems to get too far, but at the very least I've built a fair few worlds over the years, and this allowed me to start building my own. I asked for advice from my regular gaming group. There's a good solid core crew of us there, and they gave me some fantastic advice. And with the internet the way it is now, there's always more to go on. So I started building this world, which I eventually called Alanosta. But I'm not sure where I got that name from. I think it was just a kind of random name, but the name wasn't important to me, but more the theme. And the campaign has been called Frosts of Alanosta. And the whole idea is that I've set this world on the southern continent of planet. So again, it starts with, it's a little bit different. The seasons are flipped. The continent is colder. It's almost like Norway if it was on the bottom of the world instead of where it is. And that was definitely the start of things coming together for me. And I've started taking inspiration from some of my favourite things. So Final Fantasy VIII was a big one, as well as Skyrim, other Nordic inspirations. One of the Dragonlance books I read a while back called The Wanderer, which features a similar type of terrain. And I think there was a trilogy of books called the Axis Trilogy, which I've only read the actual first one by Sarah Douglas. I think she was an Australian author. But all that culminated, as well as a lot of original ideas. I haven't cribbed things wholesale, but it allowed me to add some flavour to what I hope is quite a compelling world. And I spent a good few weeks building this world to put it together for someone to play with. You'll see the map. I'm probably going to put it up on screen, as well as a couple of other images which hopefully fit the setting, just to give you some idea of what I've been doing. And that I mean, world building for me is a joy in and of itself. But trying to get my mind around adapting it for D&D made a huge difference. And one thing I learned was don't overplan too much. Like, you don't need to name everybody in the town straight off. Just have a list of names, because from what I was told, your players are gonna eventually choose to go and see someone that you never expected them to even think of talking to. And yeah, it happens. Like, there was characters I set up which in this first session my players didn't even go and have a look at. It was always a possibility, but it was nice to have that preparation, and they can always return and go and speak to them. So the players for this game, I got my regular gaming group to come and play this session, just because I knew they could give me the feedback I wanted, and I'm used to them. They're used to me. After 2 years of playing the game together, we've got a good understanding of what to expect from each other, and I knew they could give me the feedback I wanted. So yeah, I'm humming a bit, but I'm doing this just off the top of my head. Yeah, so the campaign which I play on a regular Wednesday night, the DM started us off on a boat. He threw us into the world directly, and I think I wanted to go a little bit more freeform. So I threw them into the office of the local guild. My world doesn't have adventurers per se, but the way the world has developed, there's become this need for freelancers in a way. And in the local city, at the front lines of what is essentially a giant war, the guild has begun to flourish, and the easiest thing to do was to start the party off in the main office of the leader of the Freelancers Guild, and he just tasked them with just going and helping the local tailors fetch some supplies from a dangerous area. And I come across the idea of spider silk. If you follow like modern science at all, then you'll know that the holy grail, at least for armor and high durability clothing, I guess, would be harvesting spider silk. And it's not something we can do in the modern world, but I wanted a very magical world to live in, so I figured why wouldn't they be able to magically, alchemically prepare spider silk into clothing and stuff. So I set up the idea that the tailors in the Vale, which is the starting location, can generally produce a lot of silk clothing, and they've got a silkworm farm. They've got it in a big warehouse in the middle of the town, but occasionally they send out men to go and fetch this spider silk from a nearby forest, which are quite simply called the Silken Forest. You don't have to be too clever with names, I didn't think. And go and escort the tailor so we can harvest it. And this being D&D, the spiders are naturally giant spiders. So that it was already a good idea, a good thing to send some low level but potentially quite tricky monsters against a party that, while they're level 1, the players were veterans, so I guess they knew what to expect, I guess. I think that probably made it easier. Like, looking back at the way the session ran, I don't think it would have worked so well with newbie players. With people I just didn't know. Like, if I just set up a looking for group thing on Roll20, it might have been a little bit more difficult, and I think the group dynamic would have skewed things maybe, that we're just so used to each other. But it was still interesting, and it shows the I think I could run it with other people, but maybe I do things a little bit differently. For example, when they arrived at the forest, that eventually they alerted the spiders to their presence, and the spiders attacked. I sent about, I think it was 10 all in all, large spiders, just leaping at the party, charging them. And we had a couple of, we only had one ranged party member, which was a half orc who had a bow, and he did some damage. But I also had the tailor carrying a light crossbow, just so he could support them. You know, didn't expect him to do much, but he actually shot down a couple of spiders, or at least I think he damaged at least 2. And so naturally, logically, to me, that these spiders are fairly intelligent, maybe more intelligent than the baseline. I intended them to have some awareness to them. They attacked those that shot at them, so they attacked the half orc, and they attacked the tailor, and they almost killed the tailor. The party's escort, like the dwarf fighter from the Freelancers Guild, who is leveled, he's stronger than the party. He got taken out very early on by the spider's paralysis. Like, he just couldn't do anything for the entire fight. So it was very easy to see how it could have gone wrong and how it could have gone right. Now, naturally, the spiders are quite... They weren't tough so much. Like, a lot of them went down in single hits, but it was definitely an awakening experience to perhaps lower level monsters or just less of them. But with the group I was playing with, definitely that level of monster was, I think, the ideal choice. And they did what I've been told is quite sensible in AD&D. And they hired a couple of hirelings right off the bat. They barely had any money, but they made sure they had 2 0-level fighters in their group, and those 0-level fighters paid for their weight in gold. They really did. I'm fairly sure that they matched the party kill for kill, which was interesting. And if there's one thing I've learned from playing D&D, that you start this first combat, but then you need to hook them to the next part. So the first thing I had was there was an elven messenger in amongst all the webs. So the party, whilst the tailor was collecting all the webbing, they found the web-wrapped corpses of this messenger and his horse, and there was a note on the messenger, as there would be. It was written in Elvish, which unfortunately none of the party spoke, but it was there. It was a hook for something to go with. And then, as they were leaving, I had a huge spider, I think it was, just slink up on the party and just be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I wanted to go for the talking spider thing, and she basically told them that the matriarch was unhappy because the tailors had this agreement with the spiders that the spiders allowed a few of their young to get killed and the web to be harvested if the humans of the Vale sent a herd of goats into the forest every now and again to feed the spiders. And with the state of the world which I was going for, that there was this slow rot of frost setting in, food is getting scarcer, so there's the potential trouble that if things get too bad, that this horde of spiders charges out of this forest and into the nearby communities. The main city is half a day away from this forest. There are a few fishing villages, and instantly the party went, "It's not our problem right now, but I know they can look back and be like, maybe that's a maybe that's a problem in the future. Like, if we hear about things going wrong, then they'll know what to expect." So that was good. I did miss a trick with potentially even giving them another plot hook, and that was when they met a travelling trader with a cart full of fish. He was heading up from one of the nearby coastal fishing villages. And the whole idea is that in this setting, ogres are slowly attacking the rest of the world and basically using the setting frost to their advantage to wipe everything out. They've already almost wiped out dwarves and enslaved much of their race, and with help from the goblins, they're slowly encroaching upon the Vale and it's only the fact that there's a large mountain range with a fort in it that has kept the Vale safe so far. But they have ships, they're able to raid, and the whole idea was maybe we should drop the fact that that the fishing villages are getting attacked occasionally by ogre raiding parties, and unfortunately I forgot to just drop that to the party. I found it was quite difficult to keep track of everything. I've got a new respect for my DMs, how much stuff they actually have to track, and I had so many tabs open on my computer, various files. I had a notepad in front of me. I've got a binder full of maps and tables and stuff I need, and just trying to keep track of it all was it was an interesting feat, and I definitely forgot a few things, and there was a few technical difficulties, but generally they understood that, and they were quite happy with how I relayed the story to them. So they completed the task that the Ian story task that the guild had set for them. They returned. They even harvested extra stuff to make sure they got some extra cash, which I rewarded them for. The cleric in the party, for saving the life of the tailor, was rewarded with a silk shirt, which is a fairly pricey item. But I thought it was the only thing I thought was fitting, rather than just giving them more gold. I wanted to give them something different. It did take me a few minutes to figure it out. I wasn't going to give him one of the spider silk items, because I intend them to be quite expensive and have some special properties to them. Like, these are things that take months and months of preparation work and time, and they're in high demand but they're low supply, so you can understand that. But a basic silk shirt, and I'm sure he was quite happy with that reward. So they did that, and they went and got the message translated. The cleric in the group is affiliated with the local temple, and he was able to use the library and his contact there to get it translated. And it was just a message saying that the academy for a order of knights far to the west couldn't send aid to the one in the local region. So again, that's a plot hook, and they're intending to go and take this message off to the local academy and see if there's any rewards they can gain for it. And then, of course, I was able to drop the next quest from the guild itself, and have them go and potentially scout out goblin raiding parties that have managed to make their way over the mountains to begin attacking the local farmsteads. And luckily enough, the two locations are actually quite close to each other, so they're intending to hit two birds with one stone. Already they've heard rumours and second-hand tales from local farmers about what's happening with the goblins, and it actually allowed me to do this thing, which I never had planned to begin with, but there is the half-orc character in the group. I was able to have him mistaken for a goblin. Like, half-orcs in my world are a lot more prevalent. Like, I've got this tribal faction far to the northwest of where the players currently are, that is basically just a massive intermingling of humans, orcs and half-orcs, kind of like a steppe region. But he's travelled down looking for fame and, well, not fame, but fortune to bring back to his tribe. And this allowed me to, when he knocked on the farmer's door so they could look for somewhere to sleep for the night, is have the farmer run away in shock and be quite scared. And I thought that was a nice way to tie into, like, the perhaps lack of knowledge for a farmer, and the fact that the orc needs to know he's out of his normal comfort area, which I think has worked. And it wasn't the first time he'd had a interesting reaction, but it was the first time he hadn't intended to be threatening towards anybody, which was good. And I know the player himself, he normally plays wizards, so him playing a fighter was a change of pace for him. And I know one of the cleric player is playing a cleric just to test out clerics and get used to the class. I think only the wizard is fairly up on his wizarding, but yeah, not sure where else to go with this. I'm rambling perhaps a little bit, but I will say that DMing is definitely giving me a new perspective on how D&D runs. Like I'm predominantly definitely a player, and the party, well, the group I play with intends to play another session in this setting at least once, which is fantastic for me because it allows me to do some more planning and hone my skills in that fact. But just the amount of preparation work that goes into GMing or DMing or whatever system, even with using stuff like generators and prepared lists, there's still a lot of stuff you have to go through, and it definitely keeps you on your toes. Like I like to think I'm fairly good with improv and stuff like that, but there's a lot of stuff to think about, and I guess it's only really going to come with practice. But I highly recommend it. It's such a thrill, and it's such a joy to see players move your world. Like I've always been a writer, and it's always fun to see what a character would do, but that's still all what you choose to make them do. Seeing someone move around in your world, I definitely had a couple of moments where I was just smiling, just seeing, well, hearing people interact with characters I'd created. It was a joy, and to be honest, I got to do a few silly voices. I didn't do the spider one I wanted to. I wanted to do a very man-thing like type voice. That's probably not the best one, but I had an old alchemist being like, "Oh, don't knock the spider's eyes over, please. I'll pay you the gold. I'll pay you the gold," and stuff like that, and just silly little things. And maybe there is a bit of performer in me anyway. But I think I've rambled on for almost, well, over 20 minutes now, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to hopefully look at doing some more D&D content. Maybe I'll go into do a few episodes on the state of the main session I play on a Wednesday, because that is, as I said, it's almost 2 years worth of play. We're fast approaching our 100th session, and there's a lot of backstory there. Maybe some of the silliness that come out of Amber Castle, which as a what do they call them, as a pre-arranged adventure, I can't remember the word off the top of my head right now, is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous setting, and I'll give you just an example of it. By the end of that, my character was a winged were-tiger rogue with a talking sword. Yeah. So interesting stuff comes out of that. But seriously, from the bottom of my heart, try D&D and try and be a DM sometime. It's so worth it. Hopefully this has started some great D&D content on my channel, but until next time, I have been Manic Insomnia. Good night.